Thank you all for attending today, our presentation webinar on technical documentation under the MDR and specifically a notified body perspective. I am Megan. I'll be moderating. I'll be popping in and out throughout the webinar. We'll have some poll questions for you all to engage in just so we can kind of gauge where everyone is at in these types of processes. So I'll be back in and out, and then we will have a short Q&A session at the end of the presentation. So if anything comes up throughout, again, in that question box in the top right corner, you can pop in a question and we'll come back to it at the end. At the very end, we'll be sharing the slides and the recording of this. Likely tomorrow, you'll get that in your inbox. So you will get the slides and recording. So without further ado, let me intro our speakers today. So we have Danielle Sleekers. She is a part of our team at MedEnvoy Global. She is the Director of Regulatory Affairs and PRRC. You can read a little bit more on her experience there. And then we have Salman Raza, who is our guest speaker today. Very happy to have him. Again, he's our notified body perspective. He's actively performing audits, so he gives us a great perspective on these topics. And he is the principal consultant at Resolution Bureau. So this is our fourth out of a four-part series of MDR and IVDR compliance. So if you did miss the other three, we'll share a link in the chat as well, so you can come back to that and review those recordings and slides as well. We talked about economic operators yesterday, post-market surveillance the previous week, so we'll share all of that information in the chat. Without further ado, Salman Raza, you want to go through the agenda? Welcome.
Thank you once again, Megan, and thank you for having me again. And hello everyone from across the globe. Today we are trying to cover a topic which is extremely important for medical device regulatory compliance. And it is a very difficult job to condense into a 30-40 minutes presentation. It is as if we were trying to capture the river Nile in a very small bottle. So it's a very tricky topic, but we will try our best to give you some overview of that. So our agenda today is to give you an overview of technical documentation and what notified bodies are looking for, what sort of topics, what areas they focus on. And then subsequently, after the overview of the requirements and expectation, we look at some fundamentals, the philosophical topics that notified bodies are interested in. And because we have chosen those as they are the foundation of your technical documentation. Once we understand the fundamentals and foundation, and then the mindset of creating and what notified bodies are looking for, it helps in individual topics that we have. And of course, after that, we talk about some common questions and non-conformities, and then we'll try to summarize on that note. So before we start the technical documentation overview, we have a poll. So can we run the first poll, Megan?
Yes. What is the most common issue your organization faces when submitting technical documentation to notified bodies? So feel free to share, choose one of those options that suits you or your company best. Okay, so far the majority is saying incomplete or missing documentation, and then followed by lack of clear justification for conformity. And then a few are saying poor organized files.
They are all common occurrences. We see that. So going forward, just have a quick overview of what technical file contents look like and what we are looking for from notified body perspective. So a file should give the description. So what is the scope that you are asking notified body to look at, the product, the scope, what technical documentations, what the number, what is the title, what is the revision, some administrative detail, they should be taken seriously. So under MDR regulatory requirements, the specificity and details are important. So they are not taken lightly, and what we present to notified body is important. So we need to have that detail, administrative details. Uh, Once you have described the product, once you have described your technical documentation, we're looking for your declaration of conformity. Again, there are some specific requirements in declaration of conformity, very nicely detailed in Annex 4. So one of um, the benefits of using and working with MDR, it's the details. You can find the details, and a lot of times it's easier to follow because they have spelled out individual expectation. And when notified bodies are looking, they just go line by line. If declaration of conformity has this covered. So Annex 4 is very useful reference point when drafting a declaration. Similarly, if you go into Annex 2 of the MDR, there is a very detailed aspects that are there for you to take guidance. And of course, guidance documents are also very useful. So after the administration, we would like to see, as a notified body reviewer, the product details. So a lot of times, years gone by, manufacturers did not put a lot of effort in describing the product. There were a lot of assumptions. Or it's a thermometer, everyone knows what thermometer is. Or it's a syringe, everyone knows what syringe is. So those type of mindset we have to move away. So the expectation is that you describe the product as if it's very new, no one knows about it. So even if it is an established product, your technical documentation should explain and describe the product um, with a mindset that no one knows about it. So you need to explain and describe the product in details. If there are any significant changes to this device historically or planned, we need to see those. So there are some templates that are available in the guidance documents, MTCG documents. So we encourage to follow those templates. You don't have to, they are not mandatory, but they give you good prompts. Um, so we like to see um, details in your technical documentation for your previous and similar devices, previous generation, coming generation. Um, so we like to see that. Principle of operation and its mode of action from clinical perspective, we like to see that. That's also a good indication of how much detail you need. Uh, as I said, don't assume that everyone knows about it. We technical file reviewers from notified body, they want you to define and describe what it is and how it works. So remember, your file presentation, it is also an evidence that you as a manufacturer, you are competent and you know what you're doing. So if you come across as you don't know how it works, uh, that doesn't bode well. So we need to find a right balance where you are describing and telling the information about the product and how it works as if you are the expert. You are the expert. You just sometimes you don't, manufacturers don't take credit and start assuming that I may offend notified body auditors if I start explaining this, because they might say, I know, also an expert, I'm doing it for a number of years. We don't need to worry about that. You need to show that the product, how it works, what it is, and what are the fundamentals of it. So we like to see all the elements in the uh, general description. We under MDR, certain information are very explicitly required to be visible. So unique device identification is one of them. So there is a very detailed section in Annex 6 Part C, which talks about the UDI. So we like to see the UDI, DI information clearly on a lot of places. including declaration of conformity, including in your technical documentation. So we like to see that. We also like to see, as a manufacturer, that you qualify your product as a medical device, because years gone by, there was very little effort in qualifying your product as a medical device. So under MDR, there is a lot more emphasis on this is what medical device is, as per the definition in Article 2 of medical device, and then you link back your device intended use with that definition and demonstrate in your file that how your product qualifies as a medical device. Just because it is it is a thermometer or called thermometer, it doesn't become a medical device. So we have to qualify by virtue of doing this therapeutic action or this diagnostic action or this preventive action or this monitoring. So we need to qualify your product as a medical device. So when we talk about medical device and qualification as a medical device, we are looking for connection with the elements that are described in the medical device definition under MDR and the clinical aspects of it. So clinical aspects is fundamentally important. So which clinical condition it is trying to diagnose, monitor, or prevent. So those two elements must be clearly defined in your medical technical documentation. Intended use and intended user must be clearly defined. Product classification in accordance with Annex 8 is important. Again, we need to see details how you got to that conclusion when you classify your product. What rules did you consider? What rules you decided it's not applicable? How that process of product classification has been implemented. So we need to see that process decision making in technical documentation. Compliance route, GSPR, journal safety principles. We have to see that how you again implement. So that is part of the technical documentation, which requirements are applicable. If they are not applicable, we'd like to see the justification why it is not applicable. One of the things that it is expected from notified body perspective that even if the requirement is not applicable, it is important that you identify and state that it is not applicable and rationalize why it is not applicable. So philosophically, the intent of that action is that you are making an informed decision as manufacturer. So as an informed decision means you are demonstrating that you are aware of that requirement, you have considered that requirement, and you are identifying it as not applicable with after assessment. It's not like an afterthought. It's not like I didn't write it because I didn't think of it because I didn't think it is important. So we as a notified body reviewers like to see decision made and why you have concluded. So it is an evidence of you knew the requirement, you assessed the applicability, and then your reason for concluding that it's not applicable. So that's important. So if machinery directive or PPE directive or any other directive or requirement is not applicable, including human origin tissues or blood derivatives or any nanomaterial, any aspects that you believe is not applicable, list it and identify is not applicable and justify accordingly. We like to see references of standard that you have used in the product design and development processes to ensure compliance. If there are no standards that are applicable, have you considered any common specifications? So all that information is expected to be visible. In terms of risk management, um, and device verification and validation, we like to see the clear connection between GSPR and your risk management process. So we like to see that you considered uh, the expectations and requirements in the GSPR with your risk management process. So we have to be careful when we are writing and generating documents, because it should not give an impression that you are completing or you are looking at the GSPR at the very end of the product when you are preparing the technical documentation. It should be part of your design input. So we have to make sure that the documentation reflect that approach, that you have considered compliance with medical device regulation and GSPR from the beginning. It's not an afterthought. So the risk management, uh, it's very well recognized that every regulator and every regulation expect you to follow the harmonized standard, most recognized standard for risk management, 14971. So process based, and your all the documents, top level documents should be mentioned in technical documentation and should be accessible. You don't have to copy paste whole your risk management file into technical documentation, but it should be accessible uh, to the reviewer. If they want it, they will go into the actual file. So whether you copy paste, embed, provide separately, whatever your adopted and chosen mechanism is, notified bodies are expected to see full documentation on risk management. Um, all the visibility of your design control process. We need to see that again, cross references, linkages, and all the documentation. You don't necessarily have to embed into technical documentation, but you have to give access to those documents to notified body reviewers. We like to see in your technical documentation the compatibility with the substances or compatibility of the device, fluid drug or drug device combination, whatever the compatibility in the context of your product, we like to see that. If there are software in your product, either there's an embedded software as a firmware, or there is a software application that is used in combination, or device itself is a software, whatever the status is, we need to see uh, the evidence that software was designed and developed and verified and validated in accordance with the state of the art. And one of the recognized standard 62304 is followed, and so on and so forth. So we like to see information on that. Uh, then we must see the manufacturing process, where the device is being assembled, what are the different stages of manufacturing, and how you as a manufacturer controlling those aspects. So you may be purchasing certain critical components, you may have subcontracted certain activities, you may have uh, assembly step one, and then some tests, and then assembly step two. So all that must be summarized in your technical documentation. It could be a workflow diagram, it could be steps, but notified bodies are expecting that manufacturer describe the manufacturing process and controls in place in the technical documentation. It doesn't have to be a very detailed essay on war and peace or whatever, but there should be enough information in the form of workflow or diagrams and control evidence of control that are in place to control manufacturing activities. It must be visible how the device is being manufactured and where it is being manufactured. Subsequently, any testing that you have performed in accordance with harmonized standard or any other state of the art. So we like to see those test reports as part of your verification and validation. And in future, subsequent to you getting the CE mark under MDR, your certification, your on-site surveillance audits, the notified bodies will be observing those tests. So if, For example, your technical documentation identifies that these are the critical tests that we perform during the production. Notified bodies, they will observe those tests during their on-site audits. So whether it's a electrical safety testing that you perform, high potential testing, or some biocompatibility or sterilization validation, anything that you have mentioned in your technical documentation as part of your control, as part of your risk mitigation, notified bodies uh, will be looking and observing um, um, on site. So there will be a very coordinated exercise under MDR. Years gone by, the individuals at notified bodies that review the product, they not always are the same group or same team or same individuals that are on site as an auditor, but under MDR, it is a very coordinated activity. Technical documentation reviewer of notified body talks to the operational on-ground auditors, and they talk and they advise, I want you to go and audit and observe this specific test and report that back to me. So it's a continuous process from technical documentation as well as very directly linked with the on-site quality management system audits under MDR. So that's very important that you should be aware of what you are claiming in your technical documentation. Be prepared that it will be observed and audited on site. Um, Packaging and shelf life and labeling requirements as expected. We expect to see in technical documentation what is the packaging specification used, or how you have as a manufacturer ensured integrity and shelf life, but if there are any cleaning information required, um, and the actual contents of product label. So again, one of the easier way to audit and ensure compliance is labeling contents, labeling and instructions for use contents. You go to GSPR 23 and there is a very detailed content list that you have to identify what needs to be on the label. Notified bodies, they just go through line by line, GSPR 23, and they say if the label has this, if it is applicable. If it is not applicable, then in your GSPR, it should give in rationale why it's not applicable. So, so notified bodies are assessing your labels directly straight from GSPR. Same with the instructions for use. Any specific that we need to assess for whether it's sterilized conditions, any weather, transportation, or environmental condition that needs to be communicated, it should be visible on the label and instructions for use. Similarly, as we expect informed earlier, if there are elements such as machinery directive and PPE, personal protective equipment directive, or implantable, any of those elements that are expected by the regulation, you have to list them and identify that what is the status. If it is applicable, inform your user what is the extent of applicability and how you are complying. If it is not applicable, you list and inform that it is not applicable, and it should be taken that into consideration. If your device has used any specific materials or associated biological risk in relation to certain materials such as nanomaterials or any other substance that is absorbed by or dispersed by human body, we should we like to see, we want to see those elements in the technical documentation. Again, I keep repeating, if they are not applicable, list them in your technical documentation and identify and justify why they are not applicable. So all the requirements, they are very closely connected with the GSPR. So make sure that you go through GSPR and make sure that those information are clearly visible in the technical documentation. So this is a very fundamental, very superficial top overview of the contents of technical documentation. Before we move forward for the assessment fundamentals, let's have a second poll. Megan, we have a poll too.
Yeah, how clear are you about the expectations of notified bodies when it comes to reviewing your technical documentation? Okay, it's kind of split down the middle right now. Okay, right now leading is somewhat clear, but there are still uncertainties. And then some people are very clear, we have a good understanding, and then a few others are not clear at all. We struggle to meet their expectations. But it sounds like majority is somewhat clear.
Okay, that's good. So moving on from another view and a point that I already have made, but it is one of the philosophical fundamental point that we must reemphasize, that we must qualify your product as a medical device. So in your technical documentation, as a manufacturer, you should qualify your device as a medical device. It has a lot of benefits for manufacturers because once you understood the philosophical points, what your product is doing, um, it helps you throughout the process of not only creating the technical documentation but also maintaining the technical documentation. So have a product definition, a medical device definition, in and compare against your intended use. So you'll have your intended use and medical device definition in the MDR, compare against each other and see which element of the definition aligns with your intended use and how and what clinical conditions you are trying to monitor, uh, cure, or diagnose. And by virtue of meeting and aligning those elements, you demonstrate that your product is a medical device. That is a fundamentally important thing that a lot of technical documentation are missing and notified bodies when we are receiving technical documentation. That is not clearly identified how your product is uh, qualified as a medical device. Just because some manufacturers use some difficult Latin words, it's doing that. For example, we reviewed a product a while ago where it was using very difficult Latin word, and I didn't know what that mean. And when I researched a little, it was a term for hair removal. Yeah, hair removal can be a medical device, but if I don't see the clinical condition is trying to achieve or what is the device is trying to do, we don't know if it is qualifying as a medical device or not. So we need to very clearly identify what clinical condition and what is the extent of your product, because even infusion pump could be intra-arterial, intravenous, subcutaneous, epidural. So there are so many potential conditions. So we need to contextualize, we need to see the contextual intended use of your device and qualification of your device. So it's fundamentally important that your intended use clearly identifies and aligns with the definition of the product. We have another poll. So poll number 3, let's go through that.
How often does your organization conduct remote reviews of its technical documentation? Okay, it's pretty even across the board right now. It looks like leading slightly is occasionally for major updates or submissions, and then rarely and regularly are pretty much even.
Okay. That's good. So I hope this session will help you firm up your practice, whether you need to do more or keep doing what you're doing. So that is, it should be reviewed frequently, but depending on your product and the type of product. Moving on to the next fundamental is classification of your device. So if when you are classifying your device, your technical documentation should explain the process that you have followed for classification. Don't just code is class 2A against rule 5. That doesn't, it's not adequate. We need to see these are the rules that we have followed. We did not apply this because it's an active device, so we only applied active devices rule and we don't use that. This is, we use this because it's a system, it's not only software. Whatever your decision making is, we need to, notified bodies expect you to show in your technical documentation that you know the process. So notified bodies like to see your decision making process. How did you get to that conclusion? Do not leave to reviewers' imagination and discretion. You have to present your case with conviction that I believe this is what it is because I believe in that. So you have to be very detail oriented and explain in your technical documentation how you have concluded product device classification. Um, we have another question. Let's have that one.
Does your organization have a formal post-market surveillance plan in place for your medical device? Okay, right away, it looks like majority is saying yes, it is fully implemented and operational.
Excellent. So again, that all these things in medical device regulations, they are all interconnected. So we have to be mindful of that, even post-market surveillance, it may well be active on vigilance and complaints perspective, but we also have to be vigilant and aware and alert that it may have an impact on anything, product classification and product qualification. Everything is interconnected. Um, One of the key elements in risk management, so it is one, hopefully we'll do another session on risk management in future, but it is fundamentally important that your technical documentation explain and summarize your risk management. Because we are following a harmonized standard, ISO 14971 2019, and it has been out for more than 6 years now. So most of you, we assume, that are aware that the 2019 version of the standard has switched the uh, philosophical concept of benefit risk rather than risk benefit. So the focus of the intent of the revision of the standard is that manufacturers have to demonstrate the benefits. The focus should be on the benefits rather than risk. So the one of the point that we are trying to ensure that during your risk assessment and risk identification or risk control, if your identified or chosen risk control or mitigation, we have to demonstrate that my mitigation has not compromised the benefit. So notified bodies now expect to see in your risk documentation that when you implemented a risk control for a specific hazard, you did not compromise the benefit. So it should be visibly demonstrated that after implementing the risk control or mitigation, benefit was not compromised. So that is a very important point. So in technical documentation and your risk management documentation, we have to see as a notified body reviewers that the benefits were not compromised while you were controlling a particular um, hazard. So that's important. One of the key elements, fundamental philosophical comment, but it is helping, it will help you create the file and maintain the file accordingly. One of the fundamentals is the contents of labels and IFU. So again, we have to make sure that our instructions for use are clearly and explicitly aligned with the GSPR requirements. We must make sure that all the elements that are listed in GSPR information accordingly is visible on our label, and of course subsequently they are matching with the requirements of that. So it's relatively easier to follow because there's a list and we must follow, but it is a very important and perhaps on some occasions a tedious exercise to begin with, but we have to follow. So technical documentation reviewer, they are not assuming anything. They go through what is in the GSPR, where is in your uh, label and IFU, that information is covered. So it's fundamentally important that we put a lot more emphasis on that. So all the details that are there, I'm not going to read out because of time constraint, but you can go through this information on the slide, and of course, most importantly on GSPR, that everything needs to be, they will be checking against each listed requirement, and if it is not applicable, they will go and check if it has been justified in your GSPR or technical documentation that why a certain requirement is not applicable and what are your reasons. So that's one of the key elements. Now, other thing that is fundamentally important is the continuous updates of the data you have collected in your technical documentation. Remember, it's a continuous process. It's not an event. So your technical documentation, when you prepared it, it is not it's not be all and end all on that day. It must be continuously updated. If you have to do some certain test periodically, whether it's a sterilization validation, it's a biocompatibility, your electrical safety and EMC. So remember, your product, when it was tested in the beginning, it has certain profile. Now the product is being in use for a number of years. Now with the degradation and the use is still within the compliance. So you have to continuously monitor and test. And whenever it is uh, appropriate, you have to define those frequencies in the technical documentation and then follow to update that. One of the things that is fundamentally important is if there are any changes to current standards. So you may have tested the product with the standard version that was valid at the time of initial assessment, but subsequently there's a new version of this standard has come out. So what do we need to do? Have we assessed the impacts of the new standard? Have we tested? Have we got evidence that it has still maintaining compliance against the state of the art? So that is a continuous process. So technical documentation must identify your strategy, how you're going to um, continuously monitor and update as appropriate against what elements and all the compliance. Um, so by looks of it, we have another poll question. So let's have that as well.
How would you rate your organization's current risk management practices in line with MDR requirements? A majority are saying good, mostly aligned with some gaps. And one person says excellent, fully aligned with MDR and ISO 14971, but majority is mostly aligned with some gaps.
Good. So it's always there are margins for improvement. There are always opportunities for improvement, but it's good that you are in good shape, most of you. So that's important that we continuously uh, review and update as appropriate. Um,
On that topic, Salman, I think there is also a question raised, like the recent update of ISO 15223 regarding to labeling, where, for example, where specifically the symbol of the in-country rep, so the European authorized rep, is updated. And the question is, well, is that this amendment now also applicable to the MDR, knowing that at this stage it's not yet a harmonized standard?
That is a very good question, and thank you for asking that. It is fundamentally important, and I think to answer that question, let me uh, answer the question um, as a rule of thumb, as a principle, and then we will come back to the actual individual symbol. So the question is, if a new standard comes along and then there is a new requirement in that standard, what are the expectation of from notified body? So there is no one right wrong answer for everyone. So it is contextual. But what is important from notified body perspective is how you are managing uh, the overall change. So as a management system, you should have, every manufacturer must have a mechanism for identifying new or revised regulatory requirements. So if a new standard comes along, if a new regulatory requirements comes along, the first question notified body will ask, are you aware of this forthcoming change or new change? Then, once you become aware of it, have you assessed the impact of that revised change? So when we say impact, you have to assess a meaningful way. So for example, there's a new symbol in the new version of the standard. What is the impact of the new symbol? What are the usability risks associated with using that new symbol immediately? So if I, as a manufacturer, if we start using the new symbol immediately, what risk of using that? Is any risk of confusion, risk of not recognizing the symbol, risk of misinterpretation? That one set of risk. The other set of risk, oh, if I don't use it, I will be out of compliance. So we need to assess the impact of that change, and of course make a decision. And of course there are some operational issues. You may have a number of stock of that old label. So what is your strategy to follow that? So from a notified body perspective, what we are looking for, number one, when you become aware of it, if you are aware of the new change, what did you do when you become aware of it in terms of assessment, risk, usability risk, and all the other risks? And then there is a transition plan. If you have recognized that, yeah, you will have to eventually change this new symbol or new information, what is my plan? What is the transition plan? Uh, you have to share that information and plan, ideally proactively, with your notified bodies, and take them into confidence that this is what we had become aware of, this is our assessment, this is our transition plan, and take them on board. If you do that, I can guarantee, even though every notified body is different, they have different ways of managing it, but there is a very good chance that they will accept your approach or suggest or come up with some minor updates to it. But if notified bodies are observing that on while they're reviewing your file or on-site audit, they recognize that, or they notice that you are not aware of it, there is no impact, then expect a non-conformance. You will receive a non-conformance uh, for the process. The actual event of not having the right symbol on the label or instructions for use, it will be used as an evidence for inadequacy in the process. So, and then it can be, depending on the type of device, depending on the type of information symbol, it could be a major non-conformance. If all of these 3-4 things that I have mentioned doesn't exist and you don't even know the requirement, then it could be a major non-conformance, but at least it will be a minor non-conformance so on the process. And then of course you have to come up with a solution. So it is a very important question. The answer is, what I have shared is a fundamental top level process based, process driven answer. It can be applicable to any change to harmonized standard or any specific symbol, but as long as you have documented uh, evidence that you are aware of it, you assess the impact, you have a plan of implementation, and you have shared that with notified body, there is a good chance that it will be accepted. Ignorance or absence of that evidence will be a non-conformance. So I hope it was a useful explanation. So with that, we will conclude our session, and our takeaways for this, that there must be a clear and visible commons rationale for all regulatory requirements. Even if they are not applicable, we must identify them as not applicable and add the rationale why they are not applicable. MDR requirements, expectations are a lot more formal and documented. There is no margin for assumption that it is a common knowledge. Don't assume anything, explain everything, write everything. And this is very important comment. This was shared with me as an auditor when I was audited by a competent authority, and they called me and they called me out because I wrote in my technical documentation assessment report something that was not in the technical documentation itself, but I wrote it during my audit commentary, and they marked non-conformance on me, the reviewer, saying it is not the assessment of what you know, it is the assessment of what technical documentation is telling you. So, point to you manufacturers, don't assume that what you know, what reviewers know, what industry know. Technical documentation must be clearly identifying all the requirements and explain everything. Don't leave it to someone else's uh, uh, discretion and at their mercy. So with that, I believe we have another poll, perhaps the last one.
Which of the following components of the MDR technical documentation do you find most challenging to comply with? A majority so far is saying clinical evaluation, and runner-up are risk analysis and management, tied with none. And yeah, so far clinical evaluation is leading. Thank you.
Excellent. So that's good, very useful information. So Danielle, did you want to add anything from authorized representative or importer perspective, or what you have seen in your experience?
So what I found really interesting as an interesting fact is the fact that you indicated that notified bodies during their surveillance audits are now also looking at actual tests performed during production, etc., which I'm familiar with when we do e-metro testing, for example, for Brazil. They need to, auditors need to do that exercise. I was not aware that that was now part of notified body surveillance audit practice. So that's something new I learned. So I think when we review technical files as part of our in-country rep role, so as authorized rep, we see quite some similar issues. So like you indicated, GSPRs, that there is no clear justification or that there is misalignment. So in the GSPR, it's indicated that an EI view is not applied, and when we go to the website, we clearly can see that there is an I view provided, and misalignments in general in the documentation. So overall, I think very common topics, but we still see it quite frequently, and it's I think it's very good that with the background you provided, that gives more awareness of where concerns potentially come from, and hopefully that will help manufacturers auditors to ensure that their file is very clear, contains more detailed information than considered acceptable in the past under MDD. Because sometimes we, for example, for class ones, see just that there is an exchange, like, oh, change the reference from MDD to MDR, and now we suddenly think we comply. Obviously, that is not the case. But it's good that you give that perspective. I learned something as well. Always nice
Excellent.
to have that perspective. Yes.
And let me give you another secret. Maybe I shouldn't, but I will anyway. The testing requirement that we mention in your technical documentation and auditors auditing and observing that test during their on-site QMS audit. A clue during your unannounced audit, they probably will be looking at this similar test. So what you say in your technical documentation, your critical steps and tests and how you're controlling it during an unannounced audit, notified bodies are also interested in and that type of audits. So when they come for unannounced audit, they don't want to see your training records or your management review. They want to see what you're doing at production floor and how you're reconciling all the materials and all that. So those test requirements and what you have mentioned in your technical documentation, be prepared to be audited on that. Okay, so well, thank you once again for joining us today, and hope you found it useful. So we have some time left, so let's take a few more questions if we have some.
Yeah, there are a few here. I could probably answer, probably time for two of them. So the first question is there flexibility in the level of detail required for technical documentation, or do we need to include everything that's mentioned in the MDR guidance?
Mention that's the simple conservative approach. If you do that way, there are a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? It's highly likely that you will get less questions from notified body. Let me tell you one more thing. During technical documentation review by notified bodies under MDR, the process is changed a lot more. So there is most notified bodies, they don't get engaged in conversation during the documentation review. It is happening in kind of an isolation. This is one of the expectations from regulators. So notified bodies reviewing your file in isolation, and during the review, it is very likely that they will not ask you any question for clarification. They will raise a major non-conformance. So you will receive a lot of major non-conformance just because some information was not visible, even though it's easy, because it's not applicable. So I have known many clients and companies that they said, oh, my product is in the field for 20 years and it is absolutely fine, and under MDR for technical file review, I receive 100 major non-conformance. How is that possible? And I'm not even exaggerating. Companies and manufacturers are receiving big number of major non-conformance during their technical documentation review. The number could be 50, 60, 100, 120. So there are effectively, they are not necessarily non-conformities. These are a lot of times in the years gone by were questions asked during the review, and the answer could be as simple as, it's not applicable, these are my reasons. But because information is not visible in the technical documentation, it will be written and communicated as a non-conformance. So there are benefits of tedious activity of including everything in your technical documentation upfront to avoid receiving major non-conformance later on.
So on that topic, so when the review takes place and we take that 100 questions or major non-conformities identified, Salman. So what is the topic that receives the most attention, or at least the most common findings?
A lot of times, there's no information about accessories of the device. There's no information on clinical evaluation topics such as equivalent devices and similar devices. There's no indication. The contraindications are missing in clinical evaluation documents. Your risk management is not demonstrating that uh, the benefit has not been compromised. So there's a variety of the questions and non-conformities, but it is primarily, fundamentally, it's a lack of details in the technical documentation at first place. Uh, so they are not difficult to address. It wasn't visible in the file, and when it's not visible in the file, they will write a non-conformance.
Great. Okay, I think we might have time for one more question. We'll have to be quick. What tools or software do you recommend for conducting remote reviews of technical documentation, especially when collaborating with cross-functional teams?
Ooh, that I don't know, because technical, from auditing point of view, we expect to receive documents any form as long as they are searchable. Tools, I don't know. I don't think I can advocate for one particular tools. Um, Danielle, do you have any suggestions?
No, when we see technical files, they are, although the requirements are the same, we see different setups, different file types, as long as there is quick navigation possible and it's consistent. I think all tools are acceptable as long as the documents provided are doc controlled, etc., so that they are not just Word documents that potentially could be drafts and non-controlled.
Yeah, a lot of people use different tools, whatever works for them. People use Slack, people use Google Drive, people use, uh, their FTP servers, people use, there are so many things, the type of product, type of companies, software companies use Jira quite a lot. So there are several tools that are being used. So from notified body perspective, we don't have any preference per se. As long as we receive the documents, I even received once a HTML type of thing. So I was clicking on things and then they are connected in the background. So it was there was a link to risk management. When I clicked, and just like a website, it opened the link into a risk management file. So people are getting innovative, and there is no mandatory or one right or wrong way. Whatever suits you probably is the way to go.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll wrap it up with that. So again, thank you both Danielle and Salman. This last slide here, we do have a QR code, so I encourage you to follow us on LinkedIn. We post all of our regulatory news there from all of our the different markets. We also share some value educational articles and different things going on in the space. So I encourage you to follow along there. But yeah, thank you guys for coming. We appreciate your attendance. And if you missed the last sessions, like I mentioned, I put in the chat the link to where you can find the recordings and all the other materials. And thank you, Salman, for this series of four. It was very informative and helpful, I'm sure, for a lot of people. So thank you.
Thank you.